So that was a long week of fireworks going off every which hour. My dog like running to find cover, wanting nothing to do with it. And I think the loudest noises weren't the fireworks. I think it was from all the bombshell decisions from the Supreme Court over the last week. In this video, we're going to break down the one decision that threatens not just the Kansas City housing market, not just your buying power if you're thinking of buying a home in Kansas City, but something that economists are going as far to say could topple the entire economy into a full-blown recession. So last week, as you very well know, the Supreme Court struck down the student loan forgiveness plan that would have cost about $400 billion, but would also shave off tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt for borrowers across the country. Now, ultimately, somebody was going to have to pay for this, and we all knew that at some point student loans were going to have to be repaid. But what it means right now is that for the first time in over 3 years, those payments are going to resume this October, at a time when interest rates are high, mortgage rates are high, inflation is still persisting, and the economy lacks any stable footing. Now, according to Reuters, this could set off an avalanche because during that time, the pause on repayment boosted many people's credit scores and caused them to take on new debt. In other words, it was the gateway drug that led to the average car payment being about $700 a month, and the average American carrying about $6,000 of credit card debt, again, at a time when interest rates are high, and that interest rate on a credit card is probably 28 or 30%, which is just unthinkable. Part number one, this is why economists are saying the student loan repayment situation is bad news for the economy. And it all comes down to consumer spending, or how much people are spending in the economy. Now that the average student loan borrower is going to be paying about $200, maybe more than that, every single month in student loans, that's $200 that has to come from somewhere else. And basically they're saying that when it comes from somewhere else, it slows down the rate of the economy, right? People stop spending on discretionary items like going out to eat, entertainment, etc. And instead, that money all goes to the student loans. Now, here's the most balanced take that I could find from Reuters, and it offers both sides. One economist who says this will cause a recession, one that says, maybe not so much. So here's what it reads. It says, a pretty significant impact on consumer spending as soon as the payments start again. Most of the folks who are going to have to start paying again have limited capacity to handle the increased expense while navigating other financial challenges, right? We already talked about the high credit card debt, the high car payments that people have taken on as a result of not having to pay these loans. Those are all bad things. So that's exactly why he goes on to say that I expect this is going to be the tipping point that puts the economy into a recession. Now, that one seems to be an outlier. It seems to be that, most economists, or all economists, basically agree this is going to be a bad thing for consumer spending. It's going to slow down the economy, but there's like a fringe opinion that this will actually cause a recession. The next quote I'll read you seems to reflect the consensus of economists. So this is echoed by Morgan Stanley, who says reimposing repayment will have a tangible but modest impact on growth. They go on to say they don't see this causing a U.S. recession. Now, those are the two mainstream opinions. It's going to cause a hit to consumer spending. Some economists think that's it, recession. Some economists think, you know what, it's just a speed bump. And some think that that's good because it'll solve the inflation issue altogether. Think about it this way. The Federal Reserve has had to come in because of all those really high rates of inflation and basically increase interest rates at one of the fastest paces in history. And that's like the controlling factor behind the housing crisis we've got right now in Kansas City. Nobody's selling their home. It's causing the housing shortage because they don't want to give up a 3% mortgage rate for a 6+% mortgage rate. So if inflation goes down, it could leave open the possibility that the government starts decreasing rates faster and sooner, which means home prices become a little bit more affordable because now your borrowing capacity, your buying power improves a little bit. So this is echoed in a couple articles. One is from Reuters, which says stalling consumer spending is the exact reason the Federal Reserve skipped increasing interest rates in June. Right, that decided, you know what, we're going to hold off. We're going to see what happens with inflation data. Well, another article from Forbes says this is a good thing because we shouldn't be surprised to see this show up in the economic data in the fall, and it could even show up as earlier as people prepare. If people do restart, you hope the Fed takes into account this additional source of tighter policy. So in the simplest terms possible, it's either going to collapse the economy, which not many people think is going to happen. It's going to be a little bit of a speed bump, but ultimately we'll survive. Or it's going to be a good thing because it solves inflation and means that housing affordability can improve as they start to decrease interest rates faster and sooner. Those are the three potential outcomes as it stands right now. But keep in mind, if we take a couple steps back, if this forgiveness plan actually passed, that would have meant printing $400 billion out of thin air. It's not like that money could have come from, tax revenue. It's not like we could have just cut budgets. That was money printed out of thin air that would have had to come from somewhere. And I think the cost of doing that, specifically in regards to inflation, would have been a much bigger issue for the economy and for housing affordability than just restarting those payments altogether. Nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody knows for sure which of these scenarios is actually going to happen. But if you subscribe to this channel, we'll make sure to be here every single week to keep you updated about exactly what this means for the Kansas City real estate market. So that brings us to the last part of this video, everything you need to know about how this impacts home prices and housing affordability. In the last couple of weeks, we've discussed the generational clash for homes in Kansas City, right? In the middle of a huge housing shortage, most demand is coming from millennials and baby boomers. And while baby boomers have a lot more equity, a lot more wealth that they can leverage, it's creating quite a generational divide, quite a generational wealth gap. Now, with student loan repayments resuming, that has two impacts on the ability to purchase a home. One is it impacts the ability to qualify for a mortgage, right? Your debt to income ratio, how much money you can borrow compared to how much debt you're currently on the hook for paying every single month. The second way it impacts people is the down payment, right? It's harder to save money when that $200 to $300 per month student loan payment could have previously gone into a savings account that was accruing interest. Well, now that's no longer the case. So it's harder to qualify. It's also a little bit harder to save up for a down payment. So with those two odds, mostly against millennials, that gap between millennials and baby boomers is getting even worse. Now, according to a study from the National Association of Realtors, not my favorite source to cite, but this is from 2021, and I think it's fairly accurate. It says student loan debt is one of the biggest hurdles holding potential homebuyers back from being able to save for a down payment on a home or qualify for a mortgage. With rising home prices and declining housing affordability, student debt greatly reduces a home buyer's buying power. Now, keep in mind, this was conducted in 2021. Since then, we've seen inflation get a lot worse. We've also seen a lot of borrowers take on more debt since the student loan debt was paused. Home prices have ballooned, mortgage rates are at an all-time high, housing affordability is at an all-time low. This is quite an issue for anybody who has student loans who's looking for an affordable housing payment. The one thing that could offer relief is if at the same time that student loan payments resume, that mortgage rates decline and anybody in the market for trying to buy a home either has like a net zero increase or maybe a net decrease as mortgage rates start to go down and housing payments become a little bit more affordable over the next year. One thing that I'm seeing people who already own homes who are selling and then turning around and buying another home do with the student loan news, and I expect this to continue to increase, is they'll take some of their equity from the sale of that home, and instead of putting it all into the new home as a down payment, they'll take a portion of it and just pay off the student loan or pay down a significant portion of the student loan, and then the rest will go to the new home. And depending on what your specific situation looks like, the interest rate on both of those things, and of course your timeline, everything can totally depend. If you'd like to have a conversation about what the best path forward with all of this news would be, I would love to make time for you. If you think we'd be a good fit, make sure to send me a message, phone call, email, text message. We can set up a time to sit down and make sure we're setting you up for success. Now, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button below, subscribe to stay updated on everything about the Kansas City real estate market, and I'll see you next week.